So let's go ahead and talk about the frequently made mistakes from assignment number 5. First and foremost, please don't remove the to-do you fill in here comments. That's what I use in order to quickly go through your code and give you feedback. So if you remove those things, then I have to hunt around and find the methods that you have to fill in, and that slows things down, and there's lots of things to review. A couple things. So there were a few problems I saw lurking left over from previous implementations in assignment 3 and 4. So make sure you think carefully about how to use your iterators. There's a begin and an end iterator to do the range, so make sure you use that. Also, make sure that you don't use swap in the move constructor, or rather move assignment operator here. Instead, you need to make sure that those values are set to 0 when you leave. So source will be kind of lobotomized, as we've talked about many times. So using swap there is the wrong thing to do. There may be other mistakes with your array list. I didn't go back and re-review array list. You're responsible for fixing the bugs from assignment 3 and 4 based on my previous feedback. So I just focused almost exclusively on what I saw in assignment 5, the new features, the universe and vector2 and visitor and object factory and so on. Speaking about object factory, this code here is obviously going to trigger infinite recursion because it's calling make object from within make object. So please don't do that. That's obviously going to be a problem. Down here, this doesn't make any sense. I'm not quite sure what it's doing, but it's not registering the object with the universe. Down here, make sure that you use the universe : instance method. That's the method that's used to create the universe singleton on demand the first time it's called. This is going to be calling to the inst field, which number 1 should be private, but number 2, whether it's private or not, it won't be initialized if you call it this way. So that'll blow things up. The clone method, you can simplify this quite a bit first by just calling the copy constructor, say new object star this, and then also just returning that. You don't have to assign to a temporary. Whenever you find yourself writing code where you're assigning to a temporary and then you immediately return that temporary, resist the urge to make a temporary and just return the result of doing the allocation itself. This code is way, way, way too complicated. I'm not even sure what it's trying to do, but there's a lot more going on here than you need. So please don't write complicated code. Make it very simple. Here's another mistake with make object. I don't even know how this compiles. I don't know what it's trying to do, but there is no way to do this. It just makes no sense at all. You have to learn how to use the singleton pattern to make this work properly. If you take a look at this code, it's making the object. It could be simplified, of course, as per the comments above, but it's not adding it to the universe singleton. So you won't have anything registered in your universe, which obviously is not a good thing. Then let's talk a bit about the universe class. So first and foremost, make sure that you're implementing the singleton pattern correctly. It's really very simple, but you need to make sure that you do it properly. And as you can see here, just returning a null pointer is not going to be a proper way to initialize the singleton. So read up on the singleton pattern in the textbook, or take a look at it on the Wikipedia entry, and or watch the video that I described in my walkthrough video for assignment 5. We will be covering singleton later today, but there's already singleton video out there I pointed you to in the walkthrough video that you could watch if you want a preview of what we're going to cover today. A bunch of people were doing odd things for add object. It just has to return the pointer that's passed to it. We don't have to use a factory method, begin plus index, or getting the object's size -1 and subscripting into the object's array. Just return pointer, which is what you're passed as a parameter. So that's very simple. This code, I don't have any idea what this code is trying to do. It just makes no sense at all, but obviously it's wrong. So you need to sit down and think carefully about what you're trying to do here. You're trying to add this to the array, the object's array. Likewise, you need to, let's see, I'm not really sure. Actually, I would say don't use singleton here. I'm not sure what this is doing, but this is wrong. So you need to do something more sensible there. Um, this will blow up because if you subscript into the objects array list implementation, I'm just not even sure what this is trying to do. So it's very strange. It's kind of a belt and suspenders um, solution here that's really, really weird. So that's obviously wrong. Um, don't call clear in the destructor of universe. Instead, you have to call release. And you're also missing something important. It's very important to set inst back to null. So here's another problem with the destructor for universe. First of all, release is static, so you don't need to call it via inst. You just can call release directly. That's how static objects work. And the second thing is that inst is not an array, so you shouldn't be using the array deletion syntax to delete it. In fact, you shouldn't be deleting inst at all because that's going to be managed by the underlying mechanism that's handled using the unique pointer in the test program. So it puts it in a unique pointer, and that's going to go ahead and automatically delete the universe object. So just set inst back to null pointer. That's all you need to do. In get snapshot, lots of weird things with get snapshot. First of all, don't make a copy using the copy constructor. Instead, what you want to do is you want to just make an array list of object pointers that's the same as objects.size. So pre-allocate that array. And then you have to go through and clone the elements, not use the copy constructor. So this is giving you a chance to apply the pattern that's called the prototype pattern. Same thing down here. Make sure you pre-allocate the size because that way you won't have to allocate it along the way. You need to clone this code. I'm not even sure what this code is trying to do, but it's not going to compile because this is not proper syntax for doing the lambda function feature in C++. So this is just confused all around. Don't use copy, use for each, or there's other ways to do it, but for each is probably the easiest thing to do. You also this code is technically correct, but I think it's best if you don't use a for loop with an iterator. Instead, use the for each algorithm using a lambda function with the proper capture clause. That's the better way to do it, and that will allow you to do the clone properly. And if you think about it a little bit, you can come up with some really clever ways to do this that are clean and easy to understand. I am not sure at all what this code is doing, but it's really complicated. All you need to do is just swap the snapshot with the current objects, just objects.swap snapshot, and then release. This code, I don't even want to think about what it's doing, but it's not correct and way inefficient. Same issue down here. This code is way too complicated. Just swap objects with snapshot. You don't need to make a temporary. Again, I don't want to think about what that's doing under the hood, but it's unnecessary. And you also need to use the swap method on the objects array list, not the standard swap. And then after you do the swaps, you have to make sure that you do some other stuff. So see the comments above for what else you're supposed to do after you do the swap. So take a look and see what you're supposed to be doing there. Lots of problems with release. Again, this code won't compile. You shouldn't be deleting an array list. That makes no sense. That shows a deep confusion about what's going on here with delete and array list, which is not a pointer. It's a container. So that's something you've got to fix. I recommend using a range-based for loop here rather than using this iterator-based loop. The iterator-based loop will work, but it's just more complicated than it needs to be, more typing, more syntax. Down here, this approach doesn't actually delete each pointer. It just clears the object. This approach down here, I'm not quite sure why there's a reference here, but you don't need the reference. You can just say for auto object, objects, delete object, and then make sure you clear the objects array list when you're all done with release. So you got to go ahead and free up all the memory that's allocated there as well. This also, please don't be writing code like this. Never use index-based for loops when it's possible to use a range-based for loop, or when it's possible to use the for each algorithm. Just makes things messy and invites off by one bugs and so on. Don't use this code. This code is way too complicated. It's too complicated, number one, and it also um, doesn't clean up things properly. So it won't necessarily delete the pointer, and it won't clean everything up. So that's also something you don't want to do. Now we're into the vector2 implementation. Please use the enum, or I guess it's a static int, dims for dimensions instead of the magic number 2. It's not a good idea to put magic numbers in your code if you can avoid it. This code, I don't know what this is trying to do, but it's clearly not using the proper syntax for Lambda functions. So please go back and watch the dozens of videos where I show you how to do Lambda function syntax and make sure you understand it. I'm really not sure what this is trying to do. I don't even know how this compiles, but what's in RHS from begin to end, I don't think is a reference to uint32. So I'm really not sure what this code is trying to do. This code needs to be tweaked because you're not actually accumulating the dot product into the product variable. Product is being passed by value, not being passed by reference, and so it's not updating it properly. So you have to go back and think about how you would update product, because you're trying to compute the dot product, which is multiplying all the things together and keeping a running total. This code also doesn't look correct, and it's not the way you're supposed to do this. Let's see. This computation here is overly tightly coupled to the specifics of our vector2 implementation, and it should be easy to generalize it so that you can use a Lambda function to make that work much more cleanly and much more generalizably. Same sort of problem here. You don't need to do two things. You don't need to do the multiplies with transform followed by going through and multiplying the product together. Instead, what you can do is combine those things with the proper use of a Lambda function that has the right capture clause that passes product in by reference, so you can update it. Again, similar problem here. You don't need to make two calls, one to transform, one to accumulate. You can just do one call. That'll work out fine. This is way too complicated for the vector begin implementation, the vector2 begin implementation. There's way simpler ways to do it, especially using the helper functions std : begin and std : end, which is what you should be using here. And I think this is just simply incorrect rather. You don't want to be returning the address of dims -1. Remember, the end is always one past the last element in whatever container or array that you're going to be iterating over. Please make sure that you rename either your data member or your parameter so they don't both have the same name. That's very confusing. Could cause problems. This code makes absolutely no sense at all. I have no idea what's going on here, but it certainly is not printing the contents of the object's name to the O stream that was passed into the constructor. So I don't even know where to begin with that. And then down here, this code, for some strange reason, is being passed an output stream, but then it's hard coding it to cout, which is also makes no sense. So one thing I've observed is that the people who are struggling with this programming assignments never come to office hours, never have come to any of my office hours. So in contrast, the people who are doing very well come to office hours. They typically have been thinking about the problem ahead of time. We work together. I give them some tips. They get it done. It looks great. So if you're finding yourself completely and utterly befuddled and confused, and you're not coming to office hours, I don't know what to do, because there's lots of opportunities. There's tons of resources. So make sure you come and get help, and don't just sit there completely confused. And it's very clear there's some people who are really confused at this point. And that especially shows up with things like the generic Lambda functions, which we've gone over literally dozens and dozens of times in the class. So there should be no confusion there. And if there is confusion, make sure you come to office hours to become unconfused. Okay, so that's the end of the frequently made mistakes video. I will release this shortly later today. Make sure you address all the comments. The final program is due tomorrow, and so make sure that you address all these issues and get everything working.